Good day, everyone. Today we are going to discuss about a skill that you will perform thousands of times throughout your nursing career, the clinical care and maintenance of patients with intravenous access. While inserting an IV is a highly technical skill that requires a physical precision, the real magic and where you protect your patient from the severe harm happens in the care and monitoring after that needle leaves the vein. Let's look at how we can ensure patient safety, comfort, and clinical accuracy from start to finish. By the end of this lecture, you should be fully equipped to handle five key milestones. First, we look at the pre-insertion phase and setting up your environment safely. Second, you will master the aseptic principles required to maintain a line once it's in. Third, and perhaps most importantly, for your clinical rotations, you will learn to spot local and systemic complications immediately. Fourth, we'll cover how to step in with the correct nursing interventions. And finally, we will lock down how to document everything properly. Remember, as the saying in nursing goes, if it wasn't documented, it wasn't done. Now let's understand the anatomy of the venous system. Learn to be familiar with the key target vessels, the cephalic, basilic, and the median cubital, which you can see from the illustration on the right. When we say cephalic, it is located on the lateral aspect of the arm, larger and more straight. Basilic vein is located on the medial aspect, often deep but very accessible. It's near the elbow. And median cubital, preferred for blood draws but risky for long-term IVs due to joint movement. Before we even think about opening an IV start kit, we have to perform a thorough pre-insertion assessment. This is your foundation. First is verification. You must check the physician's order and verify your patient using at least two unique identifiers, usually the full name and date of birth. Never skip asking about allergies, specifically latex tape or antiseptic like chlorhexidine or iodine. Second is site selection. We practice the distal to proximal rule. Start as low as reasonable, like the hand or lower forearm. Why? Because if you blow a proximal vein in the upper arm first, you cannot use any of the veins below it anymore. Fluid would just leak out of that higher puncture site. Also, avoid areas of flexion like the wrist or the inner elbow if you can, as well as the limbs with compromised circulation. Example is an arm on the side of a patient who has undergone mastectomy. Third is vein quality. Put your eyes away for a second and trust your fingers. Palpate a good vein where it feels like a small, bouncy, soft trampoline under the skin. If it feels hard or like a cord, it's sclerotic. Pass on it and look for another. Take a look at this table. Memorizing these colors and sizes is non-negotiable for clinical practice and your board exams as well. Remember the golden rule of gauges. The smaller the number, the larger the diameter of the catheter. A gauge 18 is green. It is a large ball. You'll use this in trauma surgeries or when administering blood products because it allows a massive flow rate of 90 ml per minute. A pink a gauge 20 or pink is your standard adult best friend. It's perfect for routine IV fluids and standard medications. A 22 gauge that is blue is narrower and safer for our older adults, pediatric patients, or anyone with highly fragile thin veins. And a 24 gauge, which is yellow, is incredibly small, reserved typically for neonates and pediatrics where fluid volumes are tightly restricted. Now let's prepare. Infection control is entirely in your hands. We practice ANT, A-N-T-T, or aseptic non-touch technique. This means that while your gloves might be clean rather than sterile, the key parts of your equipment like the tip of the catheter and the sterile hub of the extension tube must never touch anything unsterile. Cleanse the skin with 2% chlorhexidine using a firm back and forth friction rub for at least 30 seconds. Now, in our case in the Philippines, we use an alcohol to do that. Do not fan it with your hands and do not blow on it to drying process. It must air dry completely to chemically kill the bacteria on the skin surface. And finally, always flush your extension set with normal saline before inserting the IV. If you connect an unprimed tube to a patient, you are pushing air directly into their bloodstream. Now, step one is preparation and setup. We identify patient, use two unique identifiers, which we have mentioned earlier, usually the name and the birth date. Verify order. Confirm fluid type and rate. Prime extensions. Pre-flush extension tubing with saline to remove air. And position. Place the arm in a dependent position below the heart level. Now, step 2 is where we do the vein dilation strategies. Let's talk about a scenario you will face constantly. The patient with invisible or deep veins. When a vein is collapsed or flat, hitting it with a needle is nearly impossible. So our job as nurses is to manipulate the anatomy to force those veins to engorge with blood, making them large, bouncy, and visible targets. We call this vein dilation strategies. Let's look at the four physiological tools we have at your disposal. First is the gravity or the dependent position. Before you do anything else, let the patient arm dangle down off the side of the bed or chair toward the floor for 1 to 2 minutes. So why this works? It's simple physics. Gravity slows down the venous return of blood moving back to the heart, causing blood to pool naturally in the lower extremities of the limb. This hydrostatic pressure stretches the vein walls from the inside out. The second is the warm compression or heat application. If the patient hands are freezing or they have a history of difficult access, wrap the target arm in a warm, moist towel or a commercial heel warm or heel warmer for 10 to 15 minutes. So why this works? Heat is a potent natural vasodilator. When the skin detects heat, the smooth muscle lining the veins relaxes, allowing the vessels to expand in diameter. So there's a clinical tip of this. This is exceptionally useful for oncology patients, the elderly, or patients in cold hospital rooms experiencing vasoconstrictions. And then we have the tourniquet. Apply your tourniquet 4 to 6 inches above your intended insertion site. It needs to be tight enough to impede venous flow, but not so tight that it stops arterial flow. So why this works? Think of a tourniquet as a temporary clamp or temporary dam in a river. Arterial blood has high pressure, so it keeps pumping blood down into the hand. But venous blood has low pressure, So the tourniquet blocks it from traveling back up the arm. Because the blood is coming in but can't get out, the veins between the hand and the tourniquet swell up like balloons. So, for safety check, if you can't feel a radial pulse, your tourniquet is too tight and you are occluding the artery. So what you do? You loosen it. Then, fist clenching, or we call it the muscle pump. Instruct the patient to open and close their hand into a fist several times. So why it works? When skeletal muscle contract, they physically squeeze the deep veins running through them. Because veins have one-way valves, this muscle pumping action forces blood upward into the superficial peripheral veins, making them plumper and easier to cannulate. So there's a crucial warning about this, ha? Instruct them to clench, but do not let them vigorously pump their fist while you are actively drawing blood, as this can cause localized hyperkalemia, which can be falsely elevating potassium levels in the laboratory results. So let's walk through the physical technique. First, anchor the vein. Place your non-dominant thumb an inch or two below your insertion site and pull the skin taut. This prevents the vein from rolling away from your needle. Enter the skin with the bevel of the needle facing up at a 10 to 30-degree angle. Watch the clear chamber at the back of your needle. The second you enter the vein, you will see a bright pop of blood fill the chamber. This is what you call flashback, confirming you are in the vein. But wait, you have to stop. Do not push the needle further. Drop your angle almost flat, parallel to the skin, then advance the whole unit just 1 to 2 millimeters further to ensure the plastic catheter tip has entered the vein lumen. And then smoothly slide the plastic catheter forward while holding the metal needle completely still, and immediately release the tourniquet. Leaving a tourniquet on too long causes hemaconcentration and severe discomfort. Once the line is successfully in, the care begins. To keep an IV patent when fluids are not actively running, you must flush it every 8 to 12 hours with 3 to 5 ml of normal saline solution. When you flush, use a push-pause technique. Instead of one smooth push, inject the saline in short, rapid bursts. This creates a turbulent vortex inside the catheter hub that sweeps away any tiny blood clots or fibrin sheets trying to clog the tip. Step 5 is the securement and patency. For dressing care, the site must always be covered with a clean, transparent dressing like Tegaderm, so you can see the insertion site at all times. If it becomes loose, damp, or dirty, change it immediately under aseptic conditions. Secure your tubing in a clean U-loop to prevent any accidental tugs from pulling the line out, and make sure you label it clearly with the date, time, gauge size, and your initials. This is a critical slide. You must learn to distinguish between local complications. Let's first start with infiltration. It happens when the catheter slips out of the vein and non-vesicant fluid leaks into the surrounding tissue. If you touch the skin around the site, it will feel cool to the touch, swollen, and look pale or pallor. The patient might complain tightness. Another common local complication is phlebitis, which is inflammation of the vein walls. Unlike infiltration, which is cool and pale, phlebitis is warm to the touch, erythematous or bright red, and tender. You may even feel a hard, palpable venous cord along the path of the vein. Phlebitis can be chemical from harsh medications, bacterial from poor aseptic technique, or mechanical. Mechanical phlebitis happens when a catheter isn't secured properly and keeps wiggling back and forth, scraping the delicate inside of the vein. You can drastically minimize this by using proper stabilization device and securement tape to keep the hub completely stationary. Then hematoma, which is a localized collection of blood outside the blood vessels, trapped within the surrounding tissue. In the context of IV therapy, it looks like a sudden, hard, raised swelling that turns into a deep bruise around the insertion site. The cause of this occurs when the vein wall is punctured entirely through. Okay? If the needle is too large for the vessel, or if the tourniquet is left on while the needle is being advanced, it also frequently happens after an IV is removed if you fail to apply firm, direct pressure for long enough, allowing blood to leak out of the puncture hole into the tissue. So how will you know this? What are the signs and symptoms? Immediate swelling, skin discoloration, and a hard mass felt upon palpation. Other complications that you might encounter is an extravasation. This is exact same mechanism as infiltration, but with a critical difference. The fluid leaking into the tissue is a vesicant. Vesicants are highly irritating, hypertonic, or chemically destructive solutions, like those used in chemotherapy or chemotherapy agents, vancomycin, potassium chloride, or dopamine. So how would you know this? Initially, it looks like infiltration. There is swelling pain, but quickly progresses to severe burning pain, blistering, skin sloughing, and deep tissue necrosis or tissue death. While the conditions above while the conditions that we have discussed are localized to the arm, you must also watch for systemic issues that affect the entire body, such as first, circulatory overload or fluid overload, which occurs when fluids are infused too rapidly for the patient's cardiac or renal system process. What are the signs? There will be shortness of breath or dyspnea, rapid heart rate, high blood pressure. There could also be neck vein distension and wet crackles heard when listening to the sounds. Another is air embolism, which occurs when a significant amount of air enters the venous system and travels to the heart, creating an airlock that blocks blood flow to the lungs. What are the signs? Sudden chest pain, severe shortness of breath, cyanosis, tachycardia, and a dropping blood pressure. Now, to conclude, intravenous therapy is a highly invasive procedure disguised as a routine task. It requires your absolute accuracy, continuous vigilance, and clinical compassion. By maintaining strict aseptic technique and checking your sites diligently, you prevent minor complications from turning into major medical events. So do not forget, if it wasn't documented, then it wasn't done. So focus on your documentation checklist, the date and time of insertion, gauge size and catheter type, anatomical location, and of course also your number of attempts. Thank you for your time to listen. The floor is now open to any questions that you might have about IV site care, complications, or techniques before we start the practice of the procedure.